This is a 7 News, Your Voice, Your Vote Election 2025 special presentation.
Thank you for joining us tonight for this special report. I'm Adam Longo. This year, Virginia's Republican ticket featuring the Commonwealth's first black woman nominee for governor, Winsome Earl Sears, and first openly gay man for lieutenant governor, John Reid, one of the newest faces in Virginia politics. He is the son of a former Virginia delegate. He left his role as host of a conservative Virginia radio talk show in Richmond before hitting the campaign trail. And if elected, he would be the first openly gay man to hold public office in the Commonwealth. John Reid, so happy to have you in with us today. A number of questions, including some from voters that we'd like to ask you. The first I'd like to ask about the process for how you arrived at where you are right now as the nominee. Pat Harity, Fairfax County Supervisor, dropped out. He was seen as the front runner. Then you were the only candidate in his place that came up. There were some questions about blog posts. You denied have anything to do with these. The governor asked you to drop out. You did not. That's why we're here right now. So let's just start with what is your relationship with the governor and the Republican Party in Virginia right now?
Well, every speech I give, whether it's in Northern Virginia or whether it's in Bristol, in Southwest Virginia, I endorse the ticket. Winsome Sears for governor, Jason Miyares for attorney general. I hope people will consider voting for me for lieutenant governor, both Republicans and independents, and maybe even some Democrats. I think this is a very unique ticket, and I'm excited about being a part of it. I know that with Pat's departure, I wound up as the nominee. I mean, I earned it, and I've been working for Republican candidates and on behalf of Republican values for decades, but I know I have to introduce myself to people who didn't know me. Pat would have had to do that too, so I'm willing to put in that work. No days off. I'm out talking to Republicans and independent voters every day. I think we're in a great position. I mean, I can always use more money. You know, the name of the game, and I hate this, is money, so that you can reach new voters who don't know you, but I'm willing to put in the work, and I'm excited about it.
And with Pat Harity off the ticket, that also takes off of the ticket any candidate for statewide office from Northern Virginia. So questions from voters that we're hearing, Republicans in Northern Virginia, they say they don't know you. They're concerned that you might not be the one to carry on the conservative mantle. So if a voter was in front of you right now asking, how would you do that? What would you respond?
I would tell them I rented an apartment in Alexandria for a long time, and I lived in the District of Columbia when I worked for George Allen in the U.S. Senate. So I'm very familiar with the region. And all the things that you don't like about living here, I know them and would like to help solve them, whether it's traffic, which seems to be decades of turmoil in Northern Virginia, and the high taxes and some of the other issues that are a constant source of consternation in this community. I'd like to go in and be a voice of reason at the state capitol in Richmond. But don't worry, it's not like I've been living on another planet. I understand Northern Virginia pretty well. I haven't been on the Board of Supervisors, but I'm familiar with everything.
So you'd call yourself the ad hoc Northern Virginia member of the ticket?
If you want to say that, that's probably fair.
Okay. Yeah. A question about the economy. We've heard from the governor on the car tax. We've heard from other Republican lawmakers about some tax strategies that they would like to see implemented, including diversifying the tax base, reducing reliance on property tax, income tax, sales tax adjustments. What tax policy do you support, and how would you make sure that it doesn't disproportionately affect low-income families?
Well, the first thing is to get rid of this car tax. Jim Gilmore ran for governor, won for governor on getting rid of the car tax. And can I be completely honest with you? Some Republicans stabbed him in the back so that we did not achieve that. It's time to get rid of the car tax. And this week in June, a lot of people across the state had to write that check that they hate writing, one big check, to pay for a diminishing appreciation in this car that's sitting in front of their house. And they resent it, and I don't blame them for resenting it. Now, we got to replace that money somehow, but one of the things that drove me into this race was watching how Democrats in Richmond refused to give a break to the people they claimed to care so much about. I mean, they wouldn't give a tax break on gas for blue-collar workers who didn't get to sit at home during COVID, like the rest of us in our bathrobe. They had to get in the car and drive places, and I think we need to evaluate all of the taxes that the citizens are paying and maybe smash the system and redo it.
All right, well, let's dig in there just a little deeper. Yeah. We get rid of the car tax. You just said we'd have to make up for that revenue somehow. What are some ways?
Part of it is evaluating whether we have appropriately pinned our expenditures at a livable way. You know, my dad was in the legislature for 18 years representing Henrico County. I remember having conversations with him, and he actually voted against the full budget. I think at one point it was 99-1, and it's because it was growing so quickly that he didn't see it as sustainable. So behind the scenes here, I'm talking to people who've worked on the state budget to try to figure out where we could cut and where we can recalibrate. I also think that a lot of people who own homes are getting completely hosed. They've paid off their mortgage, and now they're senior citizens who are about to lose their homes because they can't pay the new tax assessment on the increased value. I mean, that's wrong. I'm going to sound like a Democrat, but I got to look out for people who, don't have any more income, and they're about to lose everything they've worked for in their life. And we need to get people in Richmond who are concerned about that.
Let's talk about people losing their jobs. The lieutenant governor, who will be the candidate for governor, the Republican candidate for governor, Winsome Earl Sears, she's faced some criticism from Democrats and federal employee unions for what they have called downplaying the federal job losses and the impact. She said that job loss isn't unusual. Perhaps the private sector can make up for that. Communities, though, are feeling the impact of these changes. So if you're elected, is that something that is concerning to you, and how can Virginia help some of these federal workers who've lost their jobs?
Well, one thing you're never going to hear from me is mockery of people who are worried about how they're going to pay their rent or their mortgage. I lost my job at one point, and it was right when the bubble burst, the housing bubble burst. It was terrible, and I was in communications. People were not hiring communications folks, and it was an extended year of unemployment, and I had to cash out my 401k. So don't ever think that I'm going to laugh or use politics to ridicule somebody in that situation. I do think that we acknowledge that we're $36 trillion in debt on the federal level, and there were going to be some adjustments. If you had to lose your job, Northern Virginia has a robust economic ecosystem, and there are other opportunities out there. I know it hurts when you lose it, but this is where you want to try to find the next job. And I think Governor Youngkin, to his credit, set up that website so that you could easily find those jobs. Doesn't mean they're going to be direct parity on pay or skill set, but I think we have shown a certain empathy and concern about getting people fully employed.
Got it. Want to pivot, talk about education now. Virginia students, they continue to see declining test scores, specifically areas of reading and math, COVID-related learning loss that we've been calling it. Are there specific policies or investments that you could see put in place that could help to turn that around?
Yeah. The number one thing I hear from teachers, some of them my personal friends, who are ejecting from the profession, and it isn't because of the paycheck, it isn't because of the hours, it's because of the lack of discipline in the schools. And I think that is probably the number one issue right now, is that the kids know that they run the school. Not the teachers, not the principals. And then unfortunately there are a lot of parents who don't back up the disciplinary actions that are taken against their own kids. I'm getting ready to roll out a couple of plans that I think might help immediately restore some sense of discipline, which I think will then focus everybody on reading and writing and arithmetic and history and being a good citizen. One of them, I'll preview it with you, and it may be controversial, it's not new, is uniforms in schools. It takes away the rivalry between the rich kids and the poor kids, and you dress this way, and I think it might serve as a leveling moment for everyone. Like, if you want to express yourself here, you need to show that you're a good student and you have a talent, not the external adornment issue, which I think is really distracting.
Also want to talk about the revised, updated history standards that were just put into place recently by Governor Youngkin. From the era of enslavement, Jim Crow, the ongoing legacy of African-American leadership. There are concerns in the Commonwealth that there's sort of this revisionist history happening. Do you support the governor's updated history standards, and how would you tweak that if so, if not?
Yeah, look, we got to tell the whole story of Virginia. I'm a native Virginian. There's some wonderful things about our past. I think next year when we celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States, Virginia should be front and center with great pride about the role that we played in the founding of the country. There's some things that are not positive, that are hurtful. It's a good thing that we have tried to perfect our country where it doesn't necessarily impede, the old attitudes don't impede modern citizens. I tell people that it's like a divorce. You can poison the minds of your kids by telling your kids about all the awful things your former spouse did, right, in an ugly way. Or you can be honest about it and try to move on and say, we have a new opportunity to get our lives together here. And some people have laughed at me for sharing that example, but I think that's what we've got to do when we tell our history, is not make it exhibited and told in a way that poisons the future. Let's look for an era of peace and prosperity where we all benefit from the society that we have struggled to create.
I want to pivot now and talk about public safety. We talk about this a fair bit on the news. Several Virginia counties, they're under scrutiny right now because of policies allowing individuals to access spaces like bathrooms and locker rooms based on their gender identity. It's especially problematic in schools. So if you could wave some sort of a magic wand, what sort of policies do you support surrounding gender identity, and how would you balance that with an environment where students and families, feel safe and heard?
Yeah, look, I'm not making a big deal out of this, but some people are. I'm the first openly gay statewide candidate in either political party, Republican or Democrat. I know what it's like to be dumped on and mocked and ridiculed and quite frankly bullied. So I never want to do that. But when I examine the trans issue, having spent 30 years as an out gay man around drag queens and trans people, and I've seen all of this up close, we're making a mistake culturally when we don't focus on the truth. There's biological truth. And if somebody comes to me with their feelings, I can work around your feelings. I can come up with a way to deal with you and help you and treat you fairly. But don't ask me to validate a lie, a factual lie. And I think that's the mistake we're making across the board, whether it's allowing real men to compete against women. I don't think we should do that. Biological men to be in the locker rooms, dressing rooms, bathrooms. I just don't think that's wise, and we're creating our own problems that are avoidable if we just focus on the truth.
Are these policies that should be legislated at the statewide level, or in your review, should they be handled by the individual counties of the state?
Well, generally I default to the locality because the individual citizens have the ability to get rid of people they don't like. It seems to be widespread consternation, though, and I think Virginia probably needs some direction and enrichment on this. And I want to be one of the voices at the table discussing it. I'm happy to talk to people about this issue, and I hope you hear as I discuss it that I want to be sensitive about it. I don't want to be dismissive of people, but we've got a big problem on our hands that is unnecessary, and I think we can fix it.
A question here from one of the voters that we talked to that posed a question. During the most recent legislative session, the Virginia General Assembly, they passed 3 proposed constitutional amendments concerning reproductive freedom, same-sex marriage, and voting rights restorations for felons. So these would have to be approved again by the General Assembly in order to go on and be voted on by voters at the ballot box. Do you think that the legislature should ultimately approve that and leave these questions to the voters?
Yeah, I think they're bad amendments. I think they're kind of cynical manipulation of people. The marriage amendment, here I am in my situation, and I got to vote no on the Democrat proposed marriage amendment. It's not that I'm against individuals being in a marriage if they're gay. That's not my point. My point is it doesn't protect religious liberty. And I think that's got to be a fundamental part of this. And I also think the Democrats have been very, I try to be nice about it, but I think it's a little conniving to use gender language which will open up lawsuits. And they know that that's going to wind up going before a judge that will pull the trigger and create all types of drama back to the gender issues we've been discussing. So it's a no on the marriage amendment. It's a no on the immediate restoration of felons' rights to vote. I think that's a cynical ploy to try to get voters. And the abortion amendment, I think, is the most extreme in the United States. Day of birth abortion. Look, I'm in the minority on this issue, so I'm not going to argue with you about first and second trimester at the moment. But day of birth abortion, even the women I know who are 100% pro-choice, they don't like that. And I think we got to discuss that. It's a no from me there.
I want to talk about immigration. That's something that's very topical, at least on the federal level right now, and as it affects the states. Federal policies, they've increased pressure on state and local authorities to cooperate with immigration enforcement officials to expel criminal aliens. Some jurisdictions refusing to do so without due process. So how would you balance, as a statewide leader, immigration enforcement in the Commonwealth, while at the same time ensuring the fair treatment of law-abiding immigrants and those who are asylum seekers in our community?
I'm glad you're making the distinction. about law-abiding citizens and law-abiding guests who are here on visas. I'm always going to say, what does the law say? Because, you know, my personal feelings don't matter. It's what the law says and whether we enforce it. And quite frankly, when I was up here living in Alexandria and Washington, working for George Allen in the Senate 21 years ago, we were trying to find something that everybody could agree on because we knew we weren't going to get comprehensive immigration reform. And these guys couldn't come up with anything that they could agree on, even closing the southern border. So I'm glad that that has happened. I think stopping the flow will help us here. But I am puzzled why there's this attitude that if you have committed a crime and you are here illegally, that you shouldn't immediately be exited from the country. I think that's reasonable and responsible, and I think most American voters appreciate that. And then we figure out about the H-1B visas and the different programs for workers and students and guests. I think we can work through this, but it's going to take reasonable people getting together at the table, and let's stop the kind of insanity that's going on right now.
Talk about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. It's really become a third rail of politics, and you can almost see an ideological line between the two parties on this issue. Where do you stand on DEI policies and initiatives? Yeah,
you know, when I was in college, I bought into the whole diversity is our strength mantra. And in my fraternity, we used to say, oh, diversity is our strength. I don't think that's true, unfortunately. Diversity in and of itself isn't a strength. Common values and common goals amongst diverse people is the strength for a society like ours. And I think we've got to try to find where we overlap. And the things that I look at, everybody, white, black, young, old, gay, straight, Latino, Asian, whoever you are, if you're in America, you want to be prosperous, right? You want to be able to earn a living, maybe really excel. So we've got to work on programs that will allow all of us a fair shot at doing that. And DEI, again, I'd like to think that everybody's benevolent when they come up with these ideas. It turned into kind of a reverse racism opportunity for people who have an axe to grind. Well, that's going to sow the seeds for racial animosity for generations to come. Let's not do that. Let's talk about meritocracy, because I think everybody can agree that you get a shot to compete, and then let's see who actually delivers.
You've alluded to this during our conversation, winning over Democrats. I mean, it will become vital if you want to win this job. You know, Virginia is a purple state at best. Local Republican coalitions have said we can't win by beating Democrats. We have to win by winning Democrats. So how do you do that, especially in a state where the favorability rating is upside down for President Trump?
Well, I think this is one of the interesting things about this ticket. You have Winsome Sears. I mean, look at Winsome Sears. She didn't get picked because she's a black woman or because she's from Jamaica. She got picked because she ran a business, she was in the House of Delegates. I think she's been a pretty good lieutenant governor. She's been a fighter when she needed to be, and she was conciliatory when she needed to be. Jason Miyares, not because he's a Latino, but because he's a really great lawyer, did a good job, in my opinion, representing Virginia Beach in the House of Delegates. That's why we're trying to put him back in the chair at the Attorney General's office. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, 20 years ago, if we had been having this conversation casually, I would have said there's no way I can possibly run. People will not accept me running. It's 2025. I think there is a new attitude, and I hope to be one of the people to say, look at the Republican Party and who's a part of the conservative values that many of us share. I think probably the majority of people in Virginia share, and let me help introduce you to an opportunity to vote for these values.
And I'll let you expand on that for my final question. If you could just, what is your message to voters here in the Commonwealth?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited about the opportunity to run. I gave up my broadcasting career. I walked away from business opportunities. And right now, this is my sole job, is to try to save Virginia from some of the really bad policies that we've seen in California and New York, to try to make sure that every citizen, regardless of their skin color or their sexual orientation or, you know, anything else that's immutable about them, that they have an opportunity to succeed in the Commonwealth of Virginia and that they can live a peaceful and happy life here. And I think you need somebody like me who is bold and vocal, who will stand up and say, hey, we're going to disagree on some issues, but we all have to obey the law. We're not going to allow riots. We're not going to allow statues and to be pulled down by an angry mob. We're not going to allow buildings to be smashed and set on fire. We're going to discuss in a very reasonable way the places that we find differences, but you have my word as a candidate and as Lieutenant Governor that I'll look for those places of overlap so that we can have a very successful Virginia for all of our citizens.
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. The election is November 4th. You can find everything you need to know before you head to the polls on WJLA.com.